Now, when we look at some of the other words, look at the word find. That's obviously a word that you could argue that is not behaving as it should. And I think I referenced a few seconds ago about the best students in the world, the sight words, as to the ones that go up on the wall or the ones that aren't following the rules. And that if we wanted to, we could take the majority of these Dolch words and say they're not the best students. They're not all following exactly what the rules are. But they're not necessarily breaking the rule to the effect that we would send them to the principal's office or put up on the word wall or the word jail. Reason being, a word like find, which is also on that pre-primer list, you can figure it out. You can work with it. Yeah, it's not doing exactly what it should. If it did, it would have a mama E at the end. And it doesn't. So a learner might say find. All they have to do is play that little game. What else can it be? What else can I try? And I will tell you a trick that I use all the time, and it's one that I'll hit when we talk about what to do when secrets don't work and thinking like a doctor. And that is that the eyes, ears, nose, and throat of a word are the A, E, I, O, and U. And just like if you go into an emergency room and your leg is hanging by a thread, the doctor still says, hop up on the table, let me take a look at your eyes. You're thinking, who cares about my eyes? My leg is falling off. The doctor's thinking, I can get the most information about what's really going on here and what the best path I should take to fix the situation is by looking into your eyes and seeing if you're going into shock, if you've lost blood, if you're having a concussion, or if it's just a flesh wound and looks a little worse than it is. For us as learners in approaching words and being word doctors, we want to also check the eyes, ears, nose, and throat first, and that is the A, E, I, O, and U. Now, when you do that, you ask yourself, okay, what else can it be? What else can I try? Simply upon looking at that word find, one would then be able to try the sound I and get the word find. Over, done, finished. Great learning experience, opportunity to reinforce individual letter sounds like f and I and I and and duh, and then be able to blend with proficiency so as to then be able to hear what sound you've just created as you've strewn them together into the word find. I do a lot of musical manipulation, and that's part of what that auditory CD is that comes with the Secret Story Pack. It's to build the automaticity to make these kind of changes or adjustments. It's kind of like running doctors through an ER scenario where they have an emergency that comes in and they have to be able to make immediate decisions and then switch gears and make a completely different decision once information comes forward that shows what they're doing at first thought is not working. So in other words, if I try the f, in, d, and it doesn't work, how quickly am I as a learner able to try the other sound for I? The musical manipulations on the CD require that those kids flip, flop, twist, and turn every single thing they think they know to see if they know that they know that they know it. And the music is what takes the edge off of being on the spot like that. Now, there's a lot more information I could give about that music in terms of what it puts you into when you look at the brain research on flow state as being the optimal learning mode. That, again, is another vlog entry for itself, and I'm going to try really hard not to thread different purposes here together because that's my chatty friend review that I got, which is that I tend to just get so excited about one thing that I'm often running into that content, which can make it hard to follow. So I'm going to try to stick with my point here. But I did want to mention that about the CD because that is the whole purpose of it, is to help us with this process of being able to play with, have power over, and enjoy wielding that power over words and sounds and patterns, taking the bit of knowledge that we have and that we know from the secret stories and using it in a flexible capacity to attack language with, just like is done in medicine. Every ailment is not cut and dry specific exactly as it looks. There are certain things a doctor can play with, figure out, and attend to, and there are other things that need to go off to a specialist because that doctor has not a clue or a tool to apply to that problem. That is the difference, and therein lies, I think, the best analogy for what I would put on a word jail versus what I would handle by playing around with it and being able to figure it out based on my ability as a learner. I would want to only put up on a word wall, and this is for purposes of reading and writing and specific to secret stories. If I put a word in a word jail, it's because it is the same kind of situation as a doctor sending you to a specialist. I don't have any power over it. There's nothing I can do about it. It needs to be sent off and taken care of in a different way. I, however, as a good doctor, can apply some different cures to what the problem is at hand. The word find I would equate to a patient where penicillin should have worked and it didn't. I had to try the ampicillin, but I was right there ready to know what the next default should be. That's the level of automaticity we want learners to have. Now, look at another word, little. Perfect example as well. The word little doesn't follow all the rules. Whether we use the analogies of the students that do exactly what they should versus the students that don't, versus the students that we got to send to the principal immediately, or whether we're using the doctor example with specialists versus the regular doctor handling it. It's the same idea. The word little. Now, in this word little, obviously, if you try to read it, you're going to get l-it-l. Now, the E, of course, they're not going to make a sound for if they're well-trained secret story students, or if they know that E's typically are silent at the end of a word. So therefore, they're not going to be bothered by the fact that the E is there. It might visually look a little odd, but it doesn't really matter when you're looking at just being able to read the word, which they're able to do. Now, what that means is that's the kind of student, if that word were a student, then no, it's not doing exactly what it should. And yes, you could officially say that it makes it tricky to read phonetically because you have a letter that isn't making its own sound. However, we don't need to send it to the principal's office or send it off to a specialist in order to cope with it. We can read it. Now, if spelling is your purpose for having a word wall, then that's a different issue. I tend to fall on the side, especially with the early grades, that experience is the best teacher. And that being able to read, getting your bearings with being able to read, gives you the ability then to put that information together for purposes of writing. When you're able to read, you will read, and reading is the best experience to fine-tune the writing. And when you look at the written samples that are on the Secret Stories website, or if you've been to any of the conferences that I've done and you've seen them, and I'll actually be making a vlog about the writing specifically a bit down the road, but you can see the fine-tuning of the spelling working its way out. I think I gave an example in an earlier blog about the ER, IR, and UR going, and I actually have their picture right here. These letters love to go driving in cars, but they're terrible, awful, horrible, no good drivers, and they always slam on the brakes and go, "Arr!" And I believe I gave the example about the word bird possibly being spelled by a young learner, B-U-R-D. And although that would be wrong, it's a proper choice. Not fully invented spelling, but a proper choice because they can go back and reread it and move on with their story. It also tells you that as a reader, they would be able, in text, to encounter that word, B-I-R-D, and know it's b-ird and not b-i-r-d. The fact that they can read it means that they will read it, and research shows they only have to read it 3 times through with an approximate IQ of 100 to be able to then know or have a visual memory formed of bird having an IR in it and not a UR or an ER. Now that's an interesting scenario, but that is really the way that you can take experience and use it in your corner to build on what you're providing learners with to read. The tools they have to read with are the same tools they'll use to write with, and the fact that they own the tool means they can read without you or their parent having to give them every other word. The more experience they get, the more fine-tuned their skills become, and then those skills are what they bring to the table and are able to finish off writing more accurately with. So again, all of this to say the word little would not have to necessarily go into a word jail. I wouldn't put it there. If I were a second grade teacher and I did see children repeatedly leave off the E at the end, even though LE is a common pattern, then you're certainly able to put it up on a word wall. And as I said at the beginning, there are a lot of different reasons you'd have word walls. I personally might have another word wall for vocabulary. You might have word walls specific to content areas that you're teaching. As I said, in a higher or middle grade, like second or third, it might be more of a spelling issue to fine-tune some of the words that maybe learners with less reading experience still are consistently spelling incorrectly. But at the early ages, I like my word wall to stand apart from those words that I expect or that I would like to empower my learners to be able to come to and read on their own, to be capable of handling themselves and not put it up as an example of something they're powerless to attend to.